lovelies, how's it going? So a few weeks ago, I set myself a challenge to see if I could learn how to animate for free so I could bring my new channel mascots, Penelope and Pumpkin, to life. That way I can replace my current intro with one that is uniquely mine, since the Kitty Corn one is licensed and lots of other channels are using the same one. If you missed my first video in this series, I shall link it here. I covered lots of the basics like the 12 principles of animation, practiced drawing the characters in lots of different poses, explored a few different animation apps, tried creating my own simple animation of a bouncing ball, which I turned into Pumpkin, and also worked out a very rough storyboard of the animation that I'm hoping to make. So to recap, I shall just quickly show you that. They're walking in, she paints M&A's B with her front paws, Art with her back paws. They sit next to the tea. She gets ready to bat it over. Over it goes, and Pumpkin goes. Now, I have to admit that I have been putting off tackling this final animation because honestly, I wasn't sure where to start. And I think that's probably a sign that I do need a bit more practice before delving into the deep end. So this week I will be sculpting Penelope and Pumpkin to get a bit more familiar with their 3D forms. I'll be following some tutorials here on YouTube for some more guided practice, getting some inspiration from life, and diving back into a few more of those 12 principles so I can truly wrap my head around how I'm going to do this. So earlier this week I dusted off the old polymer clay and got to sculpting Penelope and Pumpkin. I wanted to work from this drawing because it's probably the closest pose to the animation when they're walking across the screen, but I have flipped it so that they are facing the right way because I think that will make it just a little bit easier to work from. Now, you might be wondering, why are you wasting your time, Emma, doing this instead of practicing actual animating? But this is actually a really important step in the creative process. When you bring a character into 3D, you're forced to truly understand their shapes, balance, and personality. It will help me to see how their weight sits, how their forms look from every angle, and how their expressions read in real life. In big studios like Disney or Aardman, artists often create physical or digital models of their characters called maquettes. These act as guides to keep drawings consistent from every angle, especially when you might have several different animators working on the same project. So for me, this is my own mini version of that. It's a reference that I can turn, study, and use to make sure Penelope and Pumpkin always feel like themselves. So even if it does look like I'm taking a bit of a detour, I totally can be guilty of procrastination. But this is helping me build a stronger mental picture of them before animating them on screen. But also, let's be honest, it is kind of satisfying to see them come into life in 3D. So here they are, all finished. I think Penelope's head is perhaps a little bit smaller than the drawing and her legs might be a little bit more chunky. And I did struggle a bit with drawing her mouth onto her snout. I guess because she's almost kind of realistic and a real cat wouldn't really have an outline on their mouth. It would be more of just a kind of shadow. I did put her on a platform because she didn't seem to be able to stand without it. And that has gone a little bit wonky because she's kind of leaning forward on it. I think Pumpkin has come out pretty accurately, but overall I am really pleased with that. I think it's going to look really cute on the shelf. I feel like that would make such a cute little mini figure in a blind bag, like if I made a whole set of them in all different poses. If only I had the resources to do that. Maybe one day, a girl can dream. Now, something that I've noticed over the last few weeks as I've been drawing them and sculpting them, and you might have noticed it too, is that Penelope and Pumpkin are actually kind of starting to look a bit different to their first design. But that might not actually be such a bad thing. If you look at really early episodes of shows like The Simpsons, the characters looked totally different at first. Over the years, as animators have refined the movements and the design, things evolved to be easier to animate and more expressive. So it's not actually a flaw, it's growth. I'd love to know if you guys have noticed this happening to any of your favourite shows or characters. It is kind of reassuring to know that even the pros are still learning as they go. So next up, I wanted to study how real cats and ducks move. And I have actually got some old footage of these animals from past adventures on the channel, and I did practice drawing them from life at the time as well. So studying from real animals isn't just something that beginners like me need to do. Even professional animators rely on it. Back in the 90s, when Disney was making The Lion King, they actually brought real lions into the studio so artists could observe not just their anatomy, but their personalities. Drawing from life is a whole different ballgame from drawing from a still image. I'm definitely planning on getting out of this shed again soon to practice drawing from life a bit more, because it is honestly such a learning curve. Have you guys tried drawing animals from life? How did you find it? So this footage of cats and ducks is super helpful for studying their personalities and their movements, but they were just so energetic that trying to work from them directly from animation is almost impossible. The thought of trying to capture all 4 limbs moving independently honestly makes me want to go and crawl under a rock. So, as always, I turned to YouTube. I found some absolutely amazing tutorials by Kazillion that break down 4-legged motion literally step by step. They also cover trotting and running. Now, I'm not planning on making Penelope run full pelt across the screen, but I still was undecided on whether I wanted her to walk or to trot, so I decided to practice both. Kazillion's demo was a dog, so I tried my best to adapt it into a cat, which was tricky since their proportions and movements, while similar, do differ slightly. One nice surprise was discovering that you can actually repeat the first 4 frames, just tweaking the line work slightly to swap the legs around. That is a total time saver. So while I could definitely do with practicing this a little bit more, we have pretty much got the foundations of 4-legged movement kind of down, but Penelope's personality is definitely not there yet. I imagine that she would strut with confidence, kind of like she's on her own little catwalk. I feel like she definitely would be a lot more kind of springy and sassy. And of course, Pumpkin would be bouncing along on her back as well. So today I'm going to try and turn this basic walk cycle into Penelope's walk, using that mix of a real life reference, some of what we've learned from the tutorials and the 12 principles, and of course, lots of imagination. So let's get animating. My slippers just fell off. Okay, so I have got my tablet here in front of me and I have hit screen record. So we've got the walk. I think the legs are okay. They're very small steps. I feel like she'd maybe take slightly larger strides. The tail isn't really doing anything. I feel like her tail would perhaps be positioned upwards and kind of swaying side to side. And also I'm not really sure what's going on with the head. She's kind of doing like a pigeon thing. But we've got the foundations. I reckon we can build upon this. And then this was the trot. So I do like the trot because I think that Pumpkin would bounce up and down on her back a bit better. Or she's bouncing up and down. But I don't know if it's too fast. I mean, perhaps if we used one of those 12 principles, slow in and out, as she's hitting ground and as she's midair, that might work. I'm not sure. Trot or walk? I do like the kind of gleeful playfulness of the trot. But yeah, the tail needs some work. I also feel like if she was trotting, her head would be kind of swaying side to side. And yeah, I reckon her tail would be up and also kind of swaying side to side. I think I'm going to go for the trot. It's way more energetic and playful. But yeah, we definitely need to slow it right down. So we're going to need to add some frames in. Let's double the amount of frames. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to copy and paste every frame. Paste it to the right. This is where it gets a bit confusing though. We've got that twice. Okay, so that should have slowed it down. I've done something wrong there, but it slowed it down a bit. Where have I gone wrong? She must have put her paw down and up again. Let's figure out where that is. Okay, I think it's here. Yeah, that's it. She shouldn't. Okay, let's try that. Okay, there we go. That has slowed the trot right down. That's more the speed that I'm thinking. But I think I just need to kind of connect those movements a bit more. So every repeat frame is kind of an in-between movement. We also need to do something with her tail. It's probably not how a real cat would trot, but I think it's how Penelope would trot with her tail up. Let's just redraw that. So let's look at our maquette for that tail. Now I am going to have to redraw over this cat with Penelope's shape because she isn't an exactly realistic shape. Okay, so I think a tail would be something like that, and we would have Pumpkin on her back as well. Let's just make him a circle. Now at this moment, I think she's in the air to start with. Yeah. Okay, so she's in the air in this position, so he would be bouncing up. I'm not going to worry about her tail at this stage. I'm just going to get this bouncy ball effect, see if we can get that down first. Pumpkin kind of hits her back and squashes a little bit. And then as she comes back up, he's kind of squashing even more until his momentum kind of catches up with hers. And I'm really going to try and exaggerate that. Squish. And then he's kind of bouncing up now, and the circleness is kind of coming back. And we kind of need to get him back to where he was in the first frame, if we can. Okay, let's see how that looks. Her tail is going to look a bit weird because it's going to like glitch up for one frame, but okay. I'm not sure if that's correct. It's okay. Let's see if we can fix the tail now. I need to really think about how her tail would move. This is where the principle follow through and overlapping action come in, because her tail is going to kind of move independently of the rest of her body, but it's going to be influenced by her movement. So as she comes down, what would happen? Her tail would kind of like, but I want it to be like springy, going side to side. How do you draw a tail going side to side from this angle? I'm not even sure. Maybe it would just kind of coil slightly more as she drops down. Kind of straighten up and then coil as she hits the floor. Maybe, let's try that. Just going down so it should coil less. It should straighten up slightly. You have to try and keep that tail at the same weight. Okay, so now she's going down. It's like her tail is always being left behind. Then she hits the ground and it would kind of like catch up with her. I don't know. It sounds like I know what I'm talking about, but I really don't. This might not work. It's just going to be a case of trial and error. Let's just see. So she goes up, she's coming down. The tail is catching up, coming down. Now she's heading back up, so I think that it's going to get left behind slightly. And then it would catch up and start that like straightening out. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, it's definitely got a bit more life than it had before, but it's still not quite right. It's not really behaving like a cat's tail. It's kind of behaving like flubber stuck to her butt. So definitely gonna need some more work, and I think this is gonna take quite a while. So I shall carry on screen recording and I will speed up this whole process for you guys, either with a musical time lapse or a voiceover, depending on what mood editing Emma is in. We shall see. Hi guys, editing Emma here. So this one is definitely going to need a voiceover, but let's change the music as well while we're at it. Let's go with this one. Okay, so after much deliberating, I realised something. Trying to turn this original cat animation into Penelope was going to be way more work than just starting over. So that's what I did. Using the maquette as reference, I began by sketching Penelope and Pumpkin in a simple standing pose. I wanted Penelope's head to be turned towards Pumpkin, just like in the sculpture. That way we could actually see her adorable face. I've got to say, I really love the simplicity of FlipaClip. It's so intuitive and user-friendly, which in itself makes the whole idea of animation way less daunting than it could be. After a few tweaks, I was finally happy with their base pose. Then, following Kazillan's tutorial again, step by step, I began animating. It was definitely way more challenging, adapting Penelope's shorter, rounder proportions. She is very different from the long doggo in the tutorial. To help capture the natural bounce of a trot, everything needs to kind of move up and down. But rather than redrawing everything this time, I just copied and pasted it between frames, and just dragged it up or down, depending on which way it needed to go. This saved a lot of time. Then I copied the first 3 frames, swapping the front and the back legs, and voila, we had a repeating 4-step trot cycle. To try and add a little secondary action, I shifted Pumpkin's head sprouts and Penelope's tail and ears slightly up and down with the bounce, using the lasso tool to move them instead of redrawing them. This really helped keep their original weight consistent, which is part of the principle called squash and stretch. It's all about preserving the sense of volume and solidity while something moves. Before, I think I was changing that shape way too much, giving it that weird flubber look. Cats' tails actually don't move that much when they trot, since they're full of muscles and bones. It might still be a little bit stiff, but definitely closer to real life than it was before. I also added a bit of a head sway to Penelope, just to try and make her look a bit more gleeful. Next, I slowed the trot right down by duplicating every frame, then adjusting the second of each slightly to make an in-between. So this style of animation is called pose to pose, which is when you draw your key poses first, then fill in the gaps, rather than drawing one frame after the next, which is called straight ahead. Then came the line work. I started a new layer and redrew each frame as neatly as I could. all 12 of them. I'm hoping that fully redrawing each frame gives it a more human feel. Using the lasso tool alone saves a lot of time, but seems to make things feel a bit too clean and robotic. Once the line work was done, I wanted to add a bit more overlapping action. So I animated Pumpkin's little wing flapping joyfully as they bounced along. I noticed that FlipaClip does have a feature where you can make previous frames a different colour. That can be super handy for keeping track of motion between frames and not getting confused as to which one you are currently working on. Then it was time for a splash of colour. I coloured them in just as I usually would do in Pen Up, making sure to include Penelope's colourful painty paws. I copied the colour layer between frames to save time, then tidied it up where it didn't quite fit. This was incredibly time consuming, but honestly, even this was a breeze compared to what animators had to do back in the 1940s. Back then, they hand painted every single frame on nitrate cells. Clear sheets had to be very carefully stored away from heat, light and dust because they were so fragile and flammable. They didn't have colour pickers or undo buttons. They had to mix every colour by hand and keep it consistent from frame to frame. That must have given them a real headache. So yeah, I'm definitely grateful for digital tools like FlipaClip. Thankfully, I had actually drawn out the line work for her markings, like her stripes and her white patches. That made the colouring process so much easier, as I had a clear guide to follow. I really wish I'd done the same for her paint splodges though, as I had to keep going back and checking the previous frame to make sure that they were in the right spot. Once all 12 frames were coloured, I added one more layer for highlights. You may notice that a lot of animators skip adding shadows and highlights. That's simply because of the added time that it takes. But since I've only got 12 frames here, it seemed like it was worth it, since the highlights are kind of a signature part of Penelope and Pumpkin's look. I did try experimenting with adding a little trail of paint paws behind her, but let's just say I couldn't quite wrap my head around that in time. That's a challenge for another day. Okay, back to you, Artshed Emma. So let's see what we've got so far. Okay, I think it's definitely going to need some more work, but we're getting somewhere. I know that if I'd attempted to do this without Kazillan's tutorial, it would be a lot worse. But it's more than I had yesterday, it's progress, and I definitely feel a lot less overwhelmed by this project now that I've had some practice. And now that I've got my little maquette, I feel like I have definitely got a better understanding of their 3D form and their personalities and also their movements. I think I've kind of wrapped my head around four-legged motion, and I've definitely got a lot more familiar with using FlipaClip. Sure, it would have been amazing to have the final animation by now, but I do actually want to do a decent job of this since I am going to be looking at it week after week. And as that guy says in Toy Story 2,
you can't rush art.
I'd love to know what creative projects you've been putting off lately because it just seems too big or too scary. And when are you planning to give it a go? I shall link everything I've referenced or used today in the description, as well as a list for those 12 principles. We shall pick this up again in a few weeks. But next week, I have already got something fun planned. We are going to open this kawaii pop culture mystery box to see what creative chaos it inspires. If you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to hit all of those buttons. Make sure to check out my Etsy store for lots of cute Penelope and Pumpkin related goodies. And I shall see you next week. Penelope and Pumpkin say bye. Bye.